Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, February 5th, 2020. We are here at the Freeport High School. We have a full board here this evening, except we think Ray is coming, but we'll hopefully she'll join us. But we'll get started in the meantime with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the January 22nd, 2020 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions. Susanna, thank you. Second, Vali. All those in favor? None opposed. Great. Adjustments to the agenda?
None.
No. Good news and recognition. The only thing we have on here is the student rep report. So if she joins us, we'll let her hop in with that. Anything you want to share in the meantime? Because you don't have anything on here either.
Well, I do the budget update.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
I knew that.
Not at this moment. Jen, do you have anything you want to share from the high school?
Hi, everyone. I'll share two things that are just from today that were wonderful. One was that we had an amazing career fair today. We had 30 businesses represented. Dee Dee Bennell puts the whole thing together. Some of the businesses represented were our parent businesses, which was great. We also had a table to register voters today, which was wonderful, our students who are 17 and above. So we had a huge turnout. We prioritized 10th through 12th graders to be there during advisory, and then the 9th graders could go during lunchtime. So we were super thankful to all of the businesses. It was a huge range of careers that were represented today, too. And then the second thing that happened today is that we participate in an event called TrigStar, which is our students who are in trigonometry pre-calculus class participate in a contest where they're able to actually win a cash prize. It's a contest that happens at the school level and then goes to compete against other schools. And in the past, we had around 18 to 20 students in our honors pre-cal class participate. And this year we have over 60 participating, all of the CP classes and the honors level classes. And on top of that, the man who runs the program for us, who's, I believe his title is he's a land surveyor, came in today and he comes in tomorrow and taught a lesson, gave them practice problems, talked through his occupation so that kids could have a real connection between his career and math and also prepare for the contest. So two great things today. I don't think I think Rhea was at the career fair, but she wouldn't have known about the TrigStar competition. So it was great.
Thank you for that. Yes?
I would just say, as a report out, it was a really fun day on the slopes at Shawnee. Our high school alpine racers were there. It was very festive, girls and boys downhill, and parents with a picnic, and a really good time. So,
Well, good. Did they do well? Uh-oh. But everybody had a good time. Perfect. You can tell the difference between Lindsay and I. I'm like, what were the scores?
Maybe Mara wants to report on her board learning.
Sure. So I got to spend part of my morning with Mrs. Nickerson and the guidance counselor at Moore Street School. It was wonderful. I got to observe them in first grade, two different first grade classes, one of which did their morning meeting and the other one which had a session with the guidance counselor, Mrs. Herzog, on bullying. And it was wonderful. I was very impressed.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you for attending that. Report from the superintendent? No. Administrative reports? No. Board comments and committee reports? No. Policy review? No. Do you see how we're flying through the agenda tonight? This is fantastic. All right, unfinished business, budget review. So we'll start with Dr. Foley, who just handed us out some papers. Did we share them with the people in the crowd who need them?
I think
there's extras if anybody-
Anne, could you pick up the extras for the audience?
making it sound like there's a huge audience. It's all about presentation, people.
Now pause while that hangs out.
All right, so I do have a few budget updates. You have two pieces of paper in front of you, and let's start with the one that just says Budget Overview for RSU 5. We noticed that in my last one that I gave you that I had put, I was off by, I think, $1 million in the proposed budget, but the difference, the number, my subtraction was right, but it was a typo. So currently the proposed budget is $35,491,170. So that's our new number. We've been tweaking the budget a little bit. And so our expenditure increase is now up to an increase of a 3.8%. And now, because of the information that we have with the subsidy and everything, we do have an estimated district tax impact of 4.76%. We have good news regarding our subsidy. Our subsidy went up $456,350 from last year, and this is great news and will really help to mitigate the impact of us not being able to use our money from the unexpended fund balance to lower taxes this year because of that budget error that we had earlier in the year. We also have received word that our unemployment insurance is going up with an overall increase of approximately $20,000. So that was another adjustment we needed to make. Then we also received word since the last board meeting with our property and casualty insurance. We had budgeted an increase of 10%, and we have received word that MSMA believes that it'll be closer to somewhere between 14 and 17%. So we have increased our estimation to 16% in the budget, which is an increase of about $10,000 over what I presented to you at the last board meeting. And then we did find one other error in the custodian's hours, and so we've corrected that for an increase of $14,000. Then the second page, that our unknowns that are still out there. We've just started our negotiations with the ESP contract, so we still don't know about that. I've had no further word on the Region 10 budget, and then we're still not sure about the property and casualty. So those are our three unknowns, but the big one around subsidy, we do know that now, so that's been very helpful. Then on the other page is our we have not revised this, but we still are planning on trying to make it more user-friendly. But right now, the format you have in front of you is the format that we have used in previous years. And I will just point out at the bottom under shared revenues that we have a decrease in what we're expecting to receive in that Medicaid state agency money, and Bonnie Violet will be presenting at the next board meeting and probably can give you more detail around that. But last year we estimated that we would be receiving about $90,000 for this current year, and we're kind of on par to be bringing in that much money. But we really anticipate that next year that's going to be closer to $50,000, and that's really just due to the student population that we're serving in special ed. As I have updated you previously, because of that budget error that I anticipate, because our fund balance, our unexpended fund balance is now down to around not quite 2% of our overall budget, I'm recommending that we not use any of our undesignated fund balance to reduce taxes for this year's budget. And then the Hunter Road field maintenance has gone up slightly from last year, and so you see that increase there. That's about, I think, about a $12,000 increase, and I'm kind of looking at you. I think last year it was possibly around 94,000. By next week, we will have updated all of the detailed documents. I see in front of a lot of you your blue copy, and so next week you'll receive an updated copy with all of these changes in it. And I think that concludes my update.
Can I just make one quick clarifying question?
Sure.
The unknowns, the property and casualty insurance, because we don't know the actual number, but you did up what's in the budget to
Right.
what their thought it was going to be, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I just have one very, very minor thing, but the drivers still say 3.69% increase instead of 3.8.
Thank you. We'll get that corrected by next week. Thank you.
All right. Yep. All right. So somewhere I have my agenda. So first up to go through their budget requests for this year is the Durham Community School. Will Pitton.
Right, it feels like everyone's finding the right page. Hopefully I'm looking at the same one. Is this mic on? I'm not sure.
Yep. He really just started with, is this thing on?
That's true. All right. Well, good evening. What we tend to do is start off with just a quick check-in on enrollment and impact, and then a sort of quick wrap-up of the budget pieces we had from our current budget and an update on how those are running. And then I'll just share with you the pieces that we are requesting for consideration for next year's budget. So within our enrollment, the overall numbers are very similar as they have been. The shift for us internally is that our fourth grade will be 2 classes next year. For the last 3 years, it's been 3 sections in fourth grade. You'll see in that enrollment chart where those numbers have moved forward. We anticipate a couple of years of 2 sections there. But our second grade is going from 2 sections to 3 sections. So a fourth grade role will be moving into a second grade role. There's a class that we are kind of monitoring on this that Becky and I have been looking at together, which is our first grade. We currently are anticipating 44 students there, which would be 2 sections of 22. Our current kindergarten is a group that we anticipate that would be pushing the numbers for that class. But obviously, if a couple of students move out or a couple of students move in, we're right on the cusp with that group. So we are monitoring that first grade group as the rest of this year and enrollments sort of unfold. From last year, we had requested an additional teacher in 6th grade. You may remember all the diagrams, but the reason there was we had talked about this group of sections of 3 coming up through, which will then be back up into 7th and 8th grade. So that adding that position in 6th grade made a big difference this year. It allowed our 7th and 8th grade teachers to continue with the work they do, and just without revisiting the whole model. The difference there is that our 7th and 8th grade teachers teach 2 grade levels in the same subject as opposed to 1 grade level in 2 subjects. And the piece there was it really allowed us to continue with the professional development, because the work we do with our coaches, Kim Copperwaith with literacy and Nate Garnett with the math, it means that our math teachers are continuing with developing their skills with the 7th grade and 8th grade curriculum, and likewise with literacy with Mr. Arrett. So that position really did help us to continue that sort of movement and consistency with the teachers. And then moving forward, as you can see, as we had anticipated, we will be utilizing all those teachers with those numbers. The other request we'd had last summer was adding 3 days to administrative assistant. That was predominantly around entering in a number of books that we had ordered. What we have found is that there's plenty of work way beyond just the books, that actually getting the books entered in still had to be done. And part of that is currently that those roles have, in essence, sort of 10 days after school and 10 days before school. But the nature of the work at the moment is that there's often days right through the school year where it may need to extend an hour, or if the buses aren't all in on time, or a parent not home, that child gets brought back. So oftentimes the administrative assistant is working longer during the week. So we have requested to keep those 3 days just now as part of that work rotation. And again, it's really less about 3 days than it is about 18, 19 hours that sort of go through the year. The staffing adjustments, I beg your pardon. The other piece from last year, of course, was fieldwork money and support. And as you'll recall, all the schools were in very different places. Some with quite extensively well-established fieldwork experiences that funding was needed to support that, and other schools that had less fieldwork because of the sort of lack of funding or support. So for us, we are in that latter sort of example. So where we are this year with that work, it's been an exciting opportunity. We have a committee of teachers who are really looking at how does this work really fit in with the focus around student-centered learning and around sort of engaging sort of experiential opportunities. And so we're actually taking a look at our whole 10-year kind of grade levels and looking at what opportunities will exist across the span so that they're not either repetitive or redundant, and how those align with curriculum. So for example, our pre-K children yesterday and today, depending on whether you're a Tuesday or Wednesday student, they were at Bowdoin College at the Arctic Museum, as they've been looking at the Arctic and Antarctica and different ends of the world, and how that fitted right in with the work they're doing. And then in the past they have done nesting boxes in the spring right outside along the tree line at the back of our school, which is the back of their classroom. And for example, last year they managed to, I think, had 4 or 5 eggs hatch that they capture with cameras and bits and pieces. So we've also then added in for them, the Audubon in Falmouth does a whole piece for young children around sort of migrating birds and Maine birds that will fit right in with what they're already doing. So as an example, pre-K will be the Arctic Museum and Audubon that supplement the sort of curriculum they're working on. And we're looking at that sort of model across the grade levels. So it's evolving work because obviously you can't just suddenly put it all in place immediately. So this year we've also been doing a similar thing with enrichment, bringing into school different enrichment opportunities, a number of which are free and then a number of which cost. But looking again at how those complement the existing curriculum and kind of add both engagement but also relevancy to their work. So that's sort of a summary of some of those pieces from last year. As you all know, I can just keep going. So if you feel free to interrupt at any minute if you have a question, or at some point I will breathe, I promise you. For this coming year, we are specifically looking at a couple of requests from a staffing perspective. You might remember last year we had a workshop here around social emotional learning, and specifically we're looking at some of the supports in place across the district relative to guidance and social work services. One of the pieces that came up during that work was that in Durham the guidance counselor has a much higher student ratio than at the other schools, as well as then a far more expansive range of needs to cover. We made some adjustments this year to see if we could accommodate it within our current structure. So we had taken some other responsibilities off her plate and shifted some of the amount of teaching that was happening in the lower grades. But even with that, we're still finding it's very hard to meet the needs. And a very sort of simplistic way to sort of try and sum it up is that she's responsible for sort of at both ends of the spectrum for families, supporting families and children who are just starting school for the very first time, but also then supporting families and students who are going on to high school and with the transitions and scheduling and courses that go with that. And then the other piece, and this is far too simplistic really, but in our elementary grades, a big focus of the guidance work is very much about proactive work, getting in, doing lessons, and being sort of proactive with developing these skills. When adolescence joins the party, then there's often more kind of reactive or responsive demands as students have in-the-moment needs. And the conundrum is that sometimes those in-the-moment needs take away from the opportunity to be proactive, which becomes sort of this downward spiral, because if you're not proactive enough, you're going to end up with more reactive stuff. So we're requesting a 0.5 guidance counselor position that would bring her closer in line with the student to staffing ratios of the other schools, and would allow to try and balance those competing demands. The other aspect we are requesting is it's not got a financial impact because of the way we've looked at it, but it is a staffing shift district-wide. Is similarly to our guidance, our library is also had a much higher student to teacher ratio across, and again, of course, there's the wide range of teaching bands for her to adjust to. So our librarian teaches classes throughout the day, but then also has to sort of manage and organize the actual library. So the checking in, checking out of books, the shelving, etc., is very hard to balance with a full teaching load. And we have tried internally to try and make adjustments to support that, but again, what we're finding is that we really need some support with that. So the administrative team had come together and looked at library services across the district, and to balance that sort of inequity, but also that need, 0.4 of ed tech time that is currently already in the library department across the district will be coming to DCS to address that need. So just so that you're aware, that need is being met, but without a financial impact. Actually, I should say there will be a slight financial impact, which would be some travel compensation for this person driving up to Durham from one of the other schools. Those are the requests from a staffing perspective. Then a couple of other that we are asking for consideration of. One is it's still associated with sort of enrichment, that is requesting support for author visit. An author visit ranges in price from sort of $800 to $2,000 depending on who it is and sort of what's going on. This is an item that exists currently in most of the schools, with the exception of Pownell and Durham, and I think you maybe see Pownell also requesting some funds. And that would also then supplement what we're trying to do around some of the district goals. Another item we're asking for consideration is for $1,500 specifically in physical education. This is to buy some specific equipment that will support in K2, pre-K2 supports movement. In 5 through 8 range, it's specifically to support fitness and exercise. And whilst we utilize annual supply money to try and do these things, every once in a while we bump into a scenario where it's like, we need a little bit more to actually get that unit up and running. So there's more to that request, but we were able to buy half of that stuff this year to kind of initiate it, but to actually get that unit fully running, that's an additional request. And then the other piece is some software money you'll see there. It's around $650. The there's a range of different online resources that we are utilizing to try and support both sort of RTI and sort of progress monitoring. So that particularly we're using a particular math program right now for that. But also then we use a program called Mystery Doug, which is a science-related piece that works very well with lower grades children, which we utilize throughout our sort of elementary classrooms, not as a science instruction piece, but it's sort of a weekly video component which the children are very familiar with because they'll watch it once a week during a snack or maybe as a science experience. If you haven't seen it, what happens is, which I doubt you have seen it, to be perfectly honest with you, unless you've really seen it. Oh, you have? There you go. Okay. So I'm glad I stopped right there. The children submit requests of questions they have about sort of natural phenomena or about things in their world, and then they sort of draw out and they'll be like, oh, look, we have this question from such and such a person, and there'll be like a video intro from that child saying, I'm wondering how this happens, and then they sort of explain it in very sort of children-friendly terms, and then there's often a number of very doable experiences that the children can build upon that themselves. Last year we actually ended the year with 8th graders sort of being Mystery Doug, if you like. So 2nd graders submitted their question to the 8th graders, and then 8th graders they selected some and made their response. So they actually videoed the child with their question, and they were questions things like, how do you make ice cream? And the 8th graders made these great videos where it'd be like, that's a great question, and they actually then went on to explain how those things happen, and the 2nd graders watched their own kind of Mystery Doug science pieces, which is great, but that's not sustainable on a weekly level, as you can imagine. I think that's about it, unless I'm missing something else. If there's any questions, I'm happy to attempt to answer them.
Questions for Will? Beth?
I have a quick question. The addition of the 0.5 guidance, would that be a new part-time position?
Would it be new? Yes.
Okay.
So that's not a transfer from,
That's
so that's
not.
why that shows up in the adjustment, but the library does not.
Right.
Because it's, okay.
Right.
Any other suggestions? Yeah.
Just a general question, if you will. In the Freeport Middle School budget, there's talk about the late bus being added there. Are there similar clubs and those type things set up at Durham now, for the 6th, 7th, 8th graders? And is that just accomplished differently?
The answer to that is yes and no. So yes, we have similar club and after-school type activities. Is it accommodated differently? We don't have a late bus, and we haven't revisited that for a number of years just because we had tried it quite a long time ago, and it's just such an expansive area to cover with like one bus that it at that time, and again this is a long time ago, I believe at that time it was people would rather be picked up than do like a sort of 1 hour on a bus.
You won't wait on the bus, yeah.
The other part I think is that because we finish school
So late.
at 3:15, that bit later on an elementary schedule, the activities tend to finish at a time when parents are actually coming home from work. So I think it's a little more manageable to be picked up. What it does compromise is the ability to stay half an hour and work with a teacher, or 45 minutes to kind of like in a homework club type thing. So we do offer a study support 2 days a week that actually goes from 3:30 to 5. Children can leave sooner if they choose to, but at least the parent would know that's a time that they have more accessibility of getting there. So I guess it is accommodated differently. Yep.
Kate?
Can you explain again the teacher needs for the 1st grade? I got a little bit lost. I thought you said it would be 2 teachers.
No, I
but
beg your
there's
pardon.
3?
So what I was saying there was that that's a number We have, as we've talked about each year, there always is 1 or 2 grade levels that are right on that sort of cusp. We used to accommodate that with multi-age classrooms, but as the curriculum became more and more sort of sophisticated and we found it increasingly difficult to sort of meet all those needs through a multi-age classroom. So that grade level, grade 1 at 44, is sort of right on the cusp of being either 2 or 3 classes. Currently we have 3 teachers there. So it's not a question of adding someone, it would be a question of like whether we could actually reduce a position. And so that number right now, Becky and I had discussed several times as we were looking at this. Given the current sort of kindergarten group, who will be next year's first graders, 22 to a class doesn't feel like the right solution. We fully recognize that 14s and 15s in first grade is a very low number. But if a couple of children left, that becomes more viable as 2. If a couple of children join, it becomes more concrete as 3. So we're just monitoring that grade level over the course of this spring to see kind of how that plays out.
When will you actually, I mean, when do you pull that trigger?
Well, we had that question too, because you can pull the trigger on June 1st and then find that 7 families move in, which is not typical of Durham. So it just felt like it's a piece that we'll have a sense. Usually people who are moving, they communicate that relatively early on. They're not, most people don't suddenly move in the summer. There are times where it does happen. So I would say that each year, I would guess that probably 80% of people who are moving we know of before the end of the school year, and I would say probably 70% of students moving in we know of also, maybe 60%, but more than half we know, okay, these are families who are moving to town. They kind of plan ahead. There's obviously always some over the course of the summer, but most people I think try to plan ahead with schools.
Okay. So if it stays the way it is, the plan is 3.
Currently, yeah.
Maddie?
Do you remember off the top of your head what the policy is for that grade level?
It's right on the cusp.
Is it 20, 21, 22, or?
It's, well, no, so I guess the answer to your question is no. Which was, do I remember off the
So,
top of my
so
head?
it would be over our policy.
No, it's right in that notify.
Okay. Okay.
I think when Becky and I reviewed it, we felt this is one that we would be bringing that feedback to the team, to all of you, to tell you how we're addressing it.
My only other concern would be, like, let's say you do make that decision for the first grade, then they're having a shift in their experience because they're used to being in a smaller class
Right, but at
in
some point,
kindergarten, and
that happens. That will obviously,
that'll happen later.
it'll happen at some point, because I mean, if we were in, 3rd or 4th grade, we wouldn't really be questioning where we're at. It's really more that sort of launch. We're still in that early primary, and but again, we'll have a better sense of the group and of sort of the numbers when we get a bit later into spring.
So she just pulled the policy, and it's over 20 she has to tell us, is the notify.
Yeah, just wondering if you, and you mentioned the kindergarten class as well as being on the cusp, but having 3 teachers, but could go down to 2. That teacher, if you do go down to 2, what's the position of that teacher? Is that person residual? Do they remain within school? Or?
Well, we've generally each year the district is hiring. So what we would look at if there was a position to be filled, and so we don't really talk individuals. So this is not necessarily a particular first grade teacher, for example. It may be within our school. Let's just say that one of the other schools was hiring. Then what we would start off with, the process we generally start with is anybody interested in what we'd call a voluntary transfer. And so it could come from somewhere else. So even let's just say there was a high school position, it's a bit random, but we had a certified teacher who would be a great fit for that and looking to do that as subject specific. There may be a shift there and then another person goes somewhere else. So generally we've been able to accommodate those shifts within district with positions that are open.
Betty?
This isn't necessarily for Will, but in the proposed cuts on the grade sheet, oh, it does say it. I'm sorry. I'm noticing the teachers. It does say what schools they're from, but the special ed text, it doesn't say what schools those would be from.
So Bonnie could talk to that more next week, but I mean, that's always a last minute kind of decision because she's looking at the caseloads, kids that are moving in. So, I mean, right now, I think she'll be able to tell you maybe what her thinking is, but I think when she just looks at the caseload across the district, she feels that we can comfortably cut one.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure we have a chance to hear from whoever's presenting if this is affecting their school.
I'm not sure that currently they know. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so...
not because it's
yes.
a mystery, not because
Right.
it's a secret, but it's more because exactly. Yes, and so a number of staff within special education support services are really tied into quite specific needs. When it's more general special ed, we have a pretty predictable set of numbers. When it's more related to more intensive supports, those really can fluctuate.
Usually it's at the beginning of the year that gets settled in September. So I feel like Bonnie did some moving this past September we've had these kids move in here, these have moved away, so now we don't need this many ed techs in this program, so we're moving this ed tech from school A to school B.
What's that?
And I think to just address your question, Susanna, we have that situation that we'll be dealing with because Mass Landing currently we're proposing that we cut a teacher there. And so we'll be having those discussions at the middle school. We know we're going to have a couple of openings, so I think Ray and Emily have already started some discussions around that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Okay, so moving on to Freeport Middle School, Ray Grogan. I think he's also blue, right? Purple? Is he purple? I don't know. I got last week's and this week's.
I'm white, so hope it's the same information. Ray Grogan, Freeport Middle School. Just to kind of reflect on last year's budget first. Last year, in the proposed budget and what we have for this year is we added a 0.3 nurse, which brings us to full-time, which has been a great addition for us to have nursing there all the time. Just today, and this has nothing to do with the adding the nurse, but it has to do with the quality of the nursing that we have. We had a doctor reach out to us and just say, I've never seen a school nurse do what your school nurse is doing for this kid, and it really made me reflect on how lucky we are to have the nurses we have in the district. And when I look at this as an addition, it has been a great change within our building to have a nurse there all the time. With that, we also got an increase in fieldwork money. For us, it was a nice increase. We already had some built into our budget. With that, our goal was to drop the Kiev payment from $150 to $75. And when I did that, I was not completely confident that we were going to be able to pay the bill at the end with that. But the magazine drive, combined with the donations that we got there through that as well, really helped cover that difference. So we really use that primarily to cut the parent costs there with that. But we're also, a combination of the magazine donations and the added field money, we're looking to take the 6th graders down to the Boston Museum of Art to kick off an artifact expedition they're going to do in the spring. And there's a traveling Egyptian exhibit that's coming to Boston this summer and in September, and that lines up to our 6th grade curriculum, so we've already put into the lottery to try to get into that with our 6th grade. So that is, if we get into that lottery, that's something we would use that money for next year. So it's been, a great addition, because we kind of got hit on both sides. We got money from the school board, and we also got increased donations through the magazine drive, so that was great for us. And then now into this year's budget, we are reducing by a half of teacher, and that is due to an enrollment change. And if you remember, late last year in the budget, we cut a half a teacher once we kind of redid our schedule a little bit, and this is now the other half of that teaching position. So as this group is going on and we're seeing a decrease in enrollment over a course of a year, we're cutting a full-time teacher there. What we are looking to add is a half-time ed tech to support math in our 8th grade. We currently offer that level of support in 7th and 8th grade, and if you remember Cynthia's presentation, all of our lines were kind of going the right way except for 8th grade math. And when we look at 8th grade math, we do not offer the same level of supports that we offer in the 6th and 7th grade. So we're looking to bring that up to the same level that we offer in the other grades. The late bus, and this is something that I've talked about a lot over the years since Pownell started coming to Freeport Middle School, is the Freeport Middle School kids, there's a bus that comes by at 3 o'clock, and we'll bring them over to Mass Landing, and then they can ride the Mass Landing bus home. And so they can stay with us for 40 minutes after school, primarily for extra help, but a lot of clubs will make sure they get done at 3 o'clock so the kids can catch that late bus. And that's never been an opportunity for our Pownell students, and it hasn't been as simple as just we need to pay someone the money to make that run. It's always been we don't literally have the right number of buses, the right number of vans, so it was a much bigger expense than just the driver in the past. And at this point in time, Genesis says, with the increased buses over the last couple of years, increased vans over the year, that they can extend a run and have that come to our school, either a van or a bus, and get the kids from Freeport Middle School to Pownell, and they'll catch the 3:15 bus at Pownell and then ride the Pownell bus home. So we're excited about that, so they have kind of the same opportunities to stay after school, because the reality is our teachers don't know if the kids are from Pownell or Freeport, and a lot of times they'll say, hey, can you stay after school, grab the late bus? Oh, there's no late bus to Pownell, so we're excited about that. That'll be a nice addition to our school. And that is our budget.
So Ray, the additional EdTech for math, RTI, would that be in-class support, or would that be after school, or both?
It would be really mostly pull out, where it would be not during their math class, so they'll go into the regular math class, but they will get either support directly related to the content that's being taught, or it will be, for some kids, working on gaps that they have from previous years. So that.
Will should start making you go first, because we drill him with all sorts of questions.
The order works fine.
Yeah. You can keep your payment coming to us to keep you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Will. All right, so on to Freeport High School. Principal Golko.
So going third means I get the fewest questions, right? It's okay. Ask away. Okay. So first, just a quick review of some of the things that we prioritized for our budget last year. There were three major pieces last year. We asked for a 0.5 increase to one of our science positions, a teacher who has a 0.75. This allowed us to supply more sections of courses, particularly for our 9th graders. Now we have 4 teachers who are teaching our 9th grade course. So with the increase in numbers, we were able to maintain class size with that increase. Same for the 0.5 world language position. We were able again to offer more sections, and we actually have 2 full-time Latin teachers. That's the most popular selection for the level 1 courses, and we were able to support students' first request for the language that they wanted to take. I would say probably the most significant of our requests last year was the 1.0 full position moving to Endeavor. That's our alternative ed program, and what I'm really happy to share is that we had between 12 and 14 students in the past in the Endeavor program, and currently we have 32 students, so we were able to more than double the program with that one teacher who's been able to be in the program full-time. So that program has really had the opportunity to take off and expand. Those 3 teachers have a good amount of time to collaborate during the day, during their prep periods, and are able to support students in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, which has been wonderful. So our major requests for this year, the first is the expansion of our math department by adding a full-time math position. One thing that has been a challenge this year is that we, with the increase in our student population we're right at about 585 students, that we have not been able to sufficiently staff the math lab. The math lab is a really important support that we give our students. It's where we assign students and they're able to drop in. It's really important to have a certified math teacher in there because they support students from pre-algebra up through AP Calculus. And students are either assigned, drop in during their study halls. We have eight class periods with our rotating day. We've only been able to cover 3 of those 8 periods in the math lab. So if students weren't able to access those 3 periods through a study hall, then they would just have access to their math teacher through advisory, which is a good support, but not the same as being able to offer the math lab. In addition to that, with our increased enrollment, we're at 585. We're estimating 618 next year. The addition of the math position will allow us to cover the math lab and also to maintain our class size. We're really happy with our sizes of students in our math courses, and I think it's important for student achievement that we're seeing growth in math and great collaboration in that department, and I think we'll continue to see that with the expansion of a position. We're also asking for a 0.5 EdTech position. We currently have a 0.5 position, and this would turn it into a full-time position. There's multiple reasons for that. We have really struggled to fill that part-time position, and I think that this would help us to get quality candidates who are looking for full-time work. But beyond that, some of our teachers, what we decided my first year as principal was to disband the giant study halls as much as we could, and 9th graders were put into guided study halls. And so that was a smaller study hall setting. 20 to 22 kids was the max, and it was in a classroom with a teacher. And so adding this ed tech position would enable us to have the ed tech take over some of those and then increase the number of sections that a teacher has, which would account for our large freshman class that's coming in. So for example, one of our 9th grade teachers in social studies has a guided study hall right now. We would turn that into another 9th grade section, which would allow us to keep our numbers small as they are right now. We are definitely happy with the fact that the majority of our classes, as I've explained to the board before, might be that one section is 17 and one section is 22 or another section's 11. But overall, the vast majority of our class size is below 20, which we appreciate. And then finally, that ed tech position would serve with some guided study halls, but would also expand the number of learning lab sections that we offer. That is a more targeted support that we have in the building. That's a study hall that has more intense support for executive functioning skills, organization, time management, things like that, and we keep those below 12. That's actually one of the supports I've shared with people that students fight to get into. They don't fight us to get out of that. Knowing that Learning Lab is a place where it has been an incredible amount of support for them in a small setting like that. And that's the other portion of what that ed tech would do. And then finally, I know we have discussed this in the past year or so about the demands on our social worker. And so we are asking for an increase in social work services. This would turn our social work position for special education to a full-time position while maintaining the half position for our general ed students. We're seeing more students with social work services on their IEPs. And so right now, our current social worker is part-time general ed and part-time special ed, and we see that some of that special ed caseload has taken over the time for the general education students. All three of our guidance counselors, even with the increase in student population, will still be below the recommended average, which is 250 per counselor, and so we'll be significantly below that. We will be at about 205 per counselor. A lot of students access the counselor for social emotional support, and we feel that between the three guidance counselors and dedicated half-time social worker for the general education population, we'll see a lot of students who'd be able to be served by that. Really excited about a new class because I'm going to do the program of studies too, which is Intro to Guitar. So we're looking to purchase 10 guitars because we don't want it to be that kids can only participate if they are able to purchase a guitar. We feel pretty strongly that we need to provide that for them, similar to we have the piano class. We have 2 science classes that are in needs of textbooks. They are able to access some of the resources online, but we feel that both of these classes would benefit from a textbook, which is our AP Environmental Science course, which textbooks are outdated. And then Chemistry in the Community is our new course, which I'll talk a little bit about when I explain the program of studies. With the renovation, our security cameras have been a huge asset to us in both maintaining the security of the building, but also the safety of students. Some of the cameras are brand new. Some of them are old and need to be replaced. And so that this request would be to replace some of those interior cameras and to add some additional cameras. We have some significant blind spots on our beautiful track and field and feel that the addition of that would be helpful. That is actually part of Dennis Ouellette's budget, but targeted for the high school. That would benefit us. And then just to comment on our field work a little bit. We're excited about being able to use the field work for some things that we've had to fundraise before or apply for a grant. For example, 2 years ago, we had the performance of To Kill a Mockingbird come for all of our 9th and 10th graders. This year we have Romeo and Juliet coming for our 9th and 10th graders, and we were able to fund that partially through field work, but the head of our English department applied for a grant, and so having the field work money will enable us to bring programs like that to the larger student body. We'll also be looking at, as I've shared before, figuring out programming for our more social emotional learning and things that would take the place of Challenge Day, so that we're able to offer something in addition to the LL Bean programming that we had for all students, in particular to be able to offer something to our 9th graders in the springtime. So those are our major requests.
Maddie.
Well, thank you for that last part. I'm eager to hear more about that at another time. The security camera, will the addition of those provide greater access to bathrooms during the school day? Because we talked about that at a recent meeting, and I know that's a problem for some students.
So I actually shared with our staff today that was some misinformation that was given at the last board meeting about the reason why bathrooms are locked. Today at our faculty meeting, we reviewed all of our Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey data as a staff. And I clarified for staff that one of the reasons why the bathrooms are locked sometimes is because we forget to unlock them in the morning. And so one of the challenges that we have in this building is that this building is a community building that is used so frequently at nighttime. And so at night, we often try to lock a lot of the bathrooms. We see kids, for better or worse, are able to access all parts of the building. Dennis and I are working on that right now are there ways that we can shut things down? And so we've had incidents in the bathroom at nighttime, either vandalism or things like that. It is very rare that we lock the bathrooms purposefully during the day. As I said in the last board meeting, unfortunately, we have an issue with particularly in the boys' bathroom with some destruction. And so that's a reason why we close the bathrooms. And then some bathrooms are closed because we have a large number of bathrooms that are available in the building, and talking to the custodial staff to make sure that they can all be maintained. Some students have to walk directly from the classroom below to the floor above in order to access a bathroom, and we feel like that's a reasonable distance that they have to go. So we don't open all of the bathrooms at all of the times. One, because we can't supervise them all. Two, it's a huge piece of work to make sure. We really pride ourselves on having the bathrooms be clean and safe. And so some students have thought that we're closing them for an incident of vaping. Vaping is unfortunate, but the smell of vaping smells like lotion. And so we quickly use Lysol to clear that up. So that's not a reason why we would close a bathroom. Vandalism is pretty much the only reason why we would do that.
So I think all of that makes good sense. The only part that sounds a little unusual to me is we're not unlocking them because we don't want them to get dirty. I think we built this building with the facilities it has based on the number of kids that we have. And I think it's fine if everyone's aware that this bathroom is usually not open. But if you're running between classes and you know there's a bathroom on your way and you get there and it's now locked because they want you to go upstairs, I don't know what the solution is, but I guess I would encourage keeping them open if we have them. I understand if there's vandalism or those sort of things and safety, but because we don't want to have our custodians clean them.
Well, so maybe I should clarify. So an example is if you're downstairs, there are the bathrooms in the FPAC lobby. There's the locker room bathrooms. There's the bathroom that's behind the fitness center. There's the bathrooms that are right next to the cafeteria. So within about 30 yards, there are 4 sets of bathrooms. And there's not that many classes down there. So we don't feel the need to open. We usually never open the bathrooms in the FPAC lobby unless it's for an event. Sure. We only open the bathrooms in the cafeteria at lunch and during advisory because there's only one classroom that's down there. And there's a bathroom directly above the FPAC where our theater and music classes are. There's one directly upstairs in the new 700. So it's more about the placement of the bathroom, feeling that it's unnecessary to close those. We never close the ones in the 100 wing or the ones right here by the library, or the ones in the 700 wing are the ones that we often lock at night. And what's happening is kids are going to use them, don't report that they're locked. We don't know until like 11 o'clock that they haven't been open. So we've made a concerted effort to walk the building and make sure that those bathrooms are open. So I should clarify, I think our custodians do a wonderful job, and they could. I think we find where the location of the classes are.
Like the specialty bathrooms.
Yeah, it's not necessary.
Yeah. And I think that makes perfect sense, right? I think, the way I pictured it in my head was just random bathrooms on a given day might not be open.
Like a goose chase.
Trouble, right, yeah.
No, we wouldn't. Though it would be, some creative problem solving to figure out which one. No, I'm kidding.
But I'm glad to know you talked about it at staff and that there's been some miscommunication that can be cleared up. Because I can tell you, when my kid was a freshman last year, I heard a lot about all the times that she didn't know where she should go, and it was uncomfortable.
Belly.
I want to thank you very much for putting emphasis on the social emotional learning. That's something that we've been talking about for years, so I'm really glad to see that 0.5 addition to the social worker. Question about that is the current social worker going to maintain half special ed students and half general, or is she going to do all special ed and then we'll hire a position?
We haven't gotten into the logistics of which one we'll post, but so that's something Bonnie Violet and I are working on together.
So is there any thought of combining this half position with Durham to create a full-time position for a social worker, or the skills needed are different?
It could be. I think we want to find whoever's the best fit for the position. And so it's certainly, we're going to explore all of the options of what it could look like to fill that half-time position.
Okay. So question about the benefits. When we hire a half a person, does that position come with benefits? For a part-time,
I think it comes with half benefits.
Half benefits.
And we're not hiring a social worker at Durham.
Well, a guidance counselor. So maybe the skills are.
It's totally.
I don't know.
Just the
different
certification is different.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're back to certification.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you for putting that half a position, however you want to fill it. I wanted to ask also on the social emotional learning. Becky sent an update that you guys were exploring, possibly offering the experience of sailing to all students, not just Endeavor students. Is that going to have a budget impact? Is that happening? Where are we at with that?
So we had conversations just this week, so we're still in the conversing.
Okay.
And we don't know what the budget impact would be, I think, at this point.
Charlie's been doing a lot of research on this. We have the man who's running the program, who took our Endeavor students on, is very enthusiastic about possibilities. And so having that, our job now is to figure out what's logistically possible, what's the best opportunity for our students, and what's the population that we would address. But it's certainly something, it was a phenomenal experience for our Endeavor kids. And so thinking about how can we expand that, but it was, as Dr. Foley said, it was just this week that we even started talking about it.
Okay, so it may or may not show up in this budget later in this cycle, in the budget cycle.
Correct.
Do you think you'd even have enough time to pull it together for this budget?
No, I would doubt it. For this one, maybe. Oh, maybe.
Oh. No, I just think we're in such early stages, and so we're talking about things that, to me, possibly could be done, and it could be maybe using part of the field work. I don't know. We're talking about offering a specific semester-long course, like either oceanography, or we're talking about humanities or literature, and then that would be part of the culminating event, or maybe a way to kick it off, all the way to, that seems kind of doable to me, and I don't know whether it would have a budget impact or not. But I guess I wouldn't rule it out. At the other extreme measure, Alex is very visionary, and he's like, oh, how about if we do the whole freshman class, and we think we could do that,
Maddie.
right?
Throw them all out on a boat. I'm sure it'd be emotional.
And so, that that's like way out there. So, it's just hard to say. But we haven't ruled out, I would say, being able to offer something next year. Have we? We're
I don't think so.
It's so preliminary. When did we have that conversation? Yesterday?
Yesterday.
Yeah, so it's just
Maddie.
evolving.
That was yesterday.
Yeah.
It was like forever ago, right?
I'm glad you're having the conversation, because that fits right into what people have been asking for, more hands-on learning, and it would cover also very much so the social emotional learning piece of what we're trying to achieve, because it's such a growth opportunity for the students to be out there on their own in a vessel where they may never have been. So
They're not on their own, to be clear, right?
That said, I'm not sure that it gets to a replacement of something like Challenge Day. And so that's kind of what I was hearing, that it sounds like that might be something you're considering as a replacement for that. Or, okay, that's good to know. I just did want to just say, as you move forward with considering what kinds of programs might provide freshmen with what we used to provide them. I would love, I know that used to be a really heavy lift for Dee Dee, and I just because I know her personally, and she did an amazing job with it. But I would love to see the social worker and guidance just weigh in on that, and Bonnie weigh in on that to really determine the best kind of program to meet social emotional needs. I'd love to see that kind of level of thought go into it.
And you know, each year after Challenge Day, we definitely processed, you know, and I've done a lot of thinking about this, you know, with the questions from the board or you know, questions from others. And I think that, I think Rhea's perspective at the last board meeting was an important one in saying that, for some students, it was incredibly impactful. I think it was immensely impactful for the adults. I think I hear the most comments about Challenge Day from the adults who participated. I think some students had a very long-lasting impact from Challenge Day. I think it's something that they'll never forget. I think some kids had a short-term impact from Challenge Day, and others were very vocal about not enjoying it whatsoever. They wanted no part in that. And I think, as I've shared with the board before, our challenge was seeing something that significantly impacted the culture of the school in terms of respect and empathy. And I think I think for me it was a powerful day, and I've seen that in some kids, but I have certainly seen what Rhea said was, you know, that she didn't think we needed the Challenge Day group to necessarily do that. I'll say, like, one of the places where I've seen, in my experience, this is my 19th year of working in a high school, and the one of the most impactful things I've seen is unified basketball for the kids who participate and the kids in the crowd. I think that the empathy, there's no other athletic experience that I have ever done as an athlete, as a student, as a teacher, where the entire room is cheering for both teams, where a student with cerebral palsy who can't walk is carried to the middle. And then, you know, I mean, there's all these different experiences I think that kids can have that create empathy, and we care very much about that. And I think that there's multiple issues with Challenge Day. One, in that the cost was going to be doubled, and two was that the class was going to be split in half. They have been crystal clear with us that they will not make an exception, and next year we'll be at 165 students, and their limit is 100 for the group. So we're not even close. The first year when we asked for an exception, we were like 15 kids over. So, you know, I think we care very much about empathy. We've been talking a lot lately about respect. I think we struggle with that, shockingly, with, you know, how are we really promoting this culture of respect? We have the week after February vacation, we're doing Kindness Week, which is going to be about kindness to self, kindness to others, kindness online, and kindness to our community. And so these things, I think we're trying to figure out how can we implement them throughout. And I think that it's going to take some research for, is there a program that we want to bring in? Is it something that our guidance counselors and social worker and administrators can do together? You know, we haven't quite figured that out. But I think, you know, I would respectfully disagree that the Ella Bean Day was just a day of fun. I think that we had kids with disabilities. We had kids with real fears. We had kids who were out there helping each other either on the kayaks or on the paddleboard, on the ropes course. I think I saw some amazing community building in that day, and then figuring out how we continue that. But I know that there are strong feelings about Challenge Day. I think it's just, I'm trying to recognize, I think there's strong feelings in both camps. Some kids and parents who did not want us participating in that, and others who thought it was just an incredible experience.
Everything you just said sounds like you're moving in the right direction, and I support that, but I would comment that while certainly there are probably some adults who it was a personally profound experience for them, a lot of those parent volunteers, and I was highly engaged in helping procure those volunteers, have significant experience working with children. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it was just their personal reflection. I think it was their professional opinion as well.
Vali.
I really appreciate the fact that you're trying to explore other options. I don't hear Maddie saying necessarily that it has to be Challenge Day. I think we all recognize the challenges with Challenge Day. So please recognize that we're not just pushing for this one idea. It's the concept of what that day brought to the students of this school. That was something very unique. And I've talked to a lot of students who have done both programs. And yes, some appreciated one more over the other, but they were different. And we have to recognize that what they brought to the students, the LL Bean Day and Challenge Day, were different things. And at this point, I really appreciate it if you could just continue your search for something that may bring some of the aspects that Challenge Day did bring to the students.
And one of the things I think, just to comment on that will be interesting is we've done student summits in the past, and really the student summit, if you know what that is, we ask a question to the whole student body. They all have a chance to weigh in on a Google form. And then we've allowed or invited 50 students to come to the library. We've never gotten 50. We've come close for the cell phone policy. That was the closest one. But we've done more kind of policy-based discussions. We did cell phone policy, dress code, 2 lunches, and then we did a smaller focus group on vaping and social media. And so part of Kindness Week is we are having a student summit where, same thing, we'll put some questions out to the whole student body and then invite 50 students to come in and talk about how do we promote respect and kindness amongst our students. So it'll be interesting what they have to say there. And we bribe them with pizza and fruit and other things. We'll make sure we have fruit. And I know, but she might be watching live stream. So, but I could certainly share with the board what the comments are from the students about what would they like to see. I can ask some direct questions because we'll have kids from 9 through 12 about Challenge Day and things like that. I've not been approached by any students asking why are we not doing Challenge Day. So it might come up in that focus group.
I just wanted to add about the social emotional. Like, I hear we talk about that a lot, and I think it's really important, but I think it's also, we have to be very careful about situations that we open up that we may or may not have the ability to continue to support. I know that from my experience with Challenge Day, from what I heard from my kids, I never participated in it as an adult, but there's some real heavy stuff that gets discussed there, and in any aspect, not just Challenge Day, but anything we do that brings up some of these things that kids are going through that may or may not, school may or may not be the appropriate place, really, or may not be able to provide the appropriate aftercare, for lack of a better word. So, I think it's a really important thing, but I think it's also something that we have to be very careful about as well.
Sorry, more social emotional learning. I have a couple of questions. One was for the Endeavor program. There was a group fundraising this year, and I participated in that, and I specifically asked how we were going to continue with this level of funding for the next group of Endeavor students. The argument that was used for the fundraising was that they didn't have enough funds to provide them with experiences that they thought would be super helpful to them, and they basically made a great case, and they met their goal and exceeded it, which I was really happy to see. But I'm wondering what's going to happen next year. Are they going to fundraise again? Is this going to be folded into the budget at some point? Are we just going to cut those opportunities next year? It's great when we offer something to be able to continue to offer the same level of service or attention. So curious to know how that's going to be handled.
And we were incredibly grateful for the fundraising for Endeavor. And really what that was focused on was for the sailing experience. And so our goal was, in working with the group that was fundraising, was to raise what we thought was enough money for 2 years of funding so that then we could see what the impact is for the program, how they're using those funds. We'd like to see, we really struggled to get all of the Endeavor kids to go on the boat. There are some kids who don't think that's a great idea. And so, we're hoping that this fundraised money will support them for 2 years. The kids do some fundraising as well. They feel like that's important for them to do some various projects and things that they're either donating money to charity or they're using funds to come back to them to do trips or programs. And so then we would come to the board with the data, and we've talked about would we potentially ask for that as part of the budget. But really we want to see, what's the impact to the program that these funds can provide, and how it impacts students. But that's the hope, is that fundraising is for the next 2 years.
And then one last question, and this is about the Maine Health Survey. I've been reflecting a little bit, or actually a lot, on the number of students who may not be able to have addiction cessation services. You mentioned that we have one consultant coming one day a week, and that they're booked solid, basically. And this is without even just passing all this information to students that there are services available, because right now we don't have the capacity. Have you considered maybe increasing the number of hours that we have a consultant come into the school so that more students can be serviced, and that we can invite more students to take advantage of the services?
So we explored that this fall. Really, one of the ideas that we had was that we felt like it could be a strong support for kids if we had someone who was consulting at the middle school and also consulting at the high school. And we really struggled logistically to find, mostly it was about finding someone who had experience specifically with substance abuse. There are consultants that we could bring in that students who have insurance can access, but there's not as many who have teenage substance abuse counseling experience, and that's really the target that we were looking for. So we could potentially, bring, I think we won't stop looking for somebody who could come in, but one of the things is that I would say, similar to Jen's comment, is that sometimes counseling services are really difficult for kids in the middle of their school day. Sometimes that's not as appropriate. And so one of the things that we are doing is really working with families to connect them and talk to them about referrals for counseling outside of school. For some kids, it does not work to seek counseling in the middle of the day for 45 minutes and then go to class and talk about addiction and significant things. For the kids who work with our substance abuse counselor, it works for them, because I don't think we could get them to go to counseling in any other way, or their families. But we certainly are open to having somebody come in more. Our kids are very comfortable with our social worker, I think, and reaching out to the guidance counselors, and they are proactively trying to reach out to families and say, or to kids and say, these are the places where you can go.
Just want to ask a clarifying question on that. You mentioned a moment ago when you were talking about exploring options for middle school and high school, and having somebody come in whom may be accessed by students with insurance. With the current setup, students don't need to have their own insurance to access assistance now, do they?
Yes, they do.
They do, okay.
Mm-hmm. Which is unfortunate. That's a change in the provider. Okay. And so Day One was who we worked with in the past, and they restructured their organization. They were able to take some students with no insurance based on grant funding, and they're not able to do that anymore.
So does that mean that for students to access assistance either through school or outside of school, it has implications on personal costs?
It might. The bigger implication is that parents are aware.
And parents, yeah.
That's the bigger, that is the bigger challenge, I would say. Yeah. Not to say parents shouldn't be aware, but some kids will not seek counseling because their parents know. Right. And so right now, if a student, feels strongly about not involving parents, then they seek out our social worker or our guidance counselors.
So when you mentioned last time there was a new requirement to disclose to the parents that the students were accessing the services, is
about insurance. That's the only reason.
Just about insurance, because it just changed. So it was about the money, not about the issue itself that they may be discussing.
Right. So in the past, we could refer people to our contracted contracted counselor for substance abuse. And I think I mentioned to the board, it's one of the most highly confidential pieces of information that we have. We don't tell teachers that teachers have no idea who accesses the substance abuse counselor, nor can we share that with them. And so we were able to do that without involving parents. I think that's, I think that's difficult. Being a parent, that is a difficult thing to hear, but that is the case, that some kids were able to access it without parents knowing, and we're no longer able to do that.
So have you thought about maybe bringing this position in-house so that, first of all, students have access to the services in private, and also that all students can take advantage of the services? Because I have to tell you, most families have high deductibles, so even those with insurance end up paying out of pocket for the service.
And our social worker, I think, is really well equipped. She's got a lot of experience with high school students, so she addresses substance abuse and use because often, if right now, the numbers of students accessing this wouldn't support bringing a full-time person or a half-time person into our staff. And often it's very rare that the substance abuse issue stands alone. It's usually coupled with depression and other issues. And so oftentimes students are addressed with a team approach where our nurse is involved and our guidance counselor is involved. And so it's certainly not that we, if we find out that a student is struggling, we have the services here in this building to address it. I think it's that the counselor that we bring in is explicitly trained in substance abuse counseling, but our social worker absolutely addresses that with kids.
So have you seen a drop in the number of students who are accessing the services since the change?
No, she's increased this year in the number of kids that she was seeing. We had her 2 days a week last year, and we were struggling. Sometimes, again, one of the things that's a challenge is some of the kids with significant substance abuse issues also have attendance issues, so they're not always here, or they don't want to go. And so we'll hook them up. They'll have X number of counseling sessions, and then we are dragging them to go, and we don't force them. We do as much as we can to encourage them. Sometimes kids go to counseling, it's painful, and they don't want to go back. And so there's a lot of nuances to it. But I think, like I said, we work really hard to do the best we can to connect people with resources anywhere inside or outside the building if we know that a student's struggling.
Mm-hmm. So I have a personal request. When you have your focus groups, could this be part of the conversation? Just maybe some students would open up a conversation about if there were services available, would you use them? Just to see the level of interest that there may be, or how many students know that the services are there, whether they would access them if we had them, if the parents didn't have to know about it, and if they didn't have to pay for them. Just to assess the level of need there. I personally don't have a grasp of how many students need the help, but I would like to know if we had some numbers.
Absolutely. And we also did an advisory lesson that was about substance use linked to depression and to suicidal thoughts. That was earlier in it was in November, an advisory. And students got, every student in the school got a little card, and we have them all over. There's some on the desk back here in the office, in the nurse's office, in the counseling office, that says crisis line to access substance abuse information. And then the front of the card says need to talk, and it's the names of counselors, administrators, and so some advisors talked about that, about the substance abuse counselor. So, there's different levels of participation and enthusiasm for these lessons and advisory, and so we have the need to talk posters everywhere, and they're all around the school in classrooms and things like that. So but we certainly can continue to address it.
Are we all set with Jen? Thank you.
Thanks.
Brief break for you before we bring you back up. All right, athletics, Craig Sickles.
Good evening. My name's Craig Sickles. I'm the athletic administrator for RSU 5. I think one of the things that this budget does certainly continues to support and champion the benefits of education-based athletics, and that's certainly why we do what we do. It's an extension of the classroom. We're not in it to make money. We're not in it to entertain. We're in it to educate kids and have it be part of the whole learning process. I think the next page, I presented that last year for the first time. It's school sports and the main learning results. I think that shows very nicely how we intertwine with some of those academic initiatives as well. The third page is just some facts and figures that champions the benefits of what we do and why we do it. The third page is the participation. We don't really have class size, so I will note that this year, 1920 in the fall, we had 234 different students participate in the fall, and that's the second most we've ever had. The same this winter, we're up to 198, and that's also the second most. And if you look over to the total, we're at 307 without the spring, and we're very close to the three highest of 318, 334, and 345. The last 3 years of total kids involved in sports at one time or another throughout the year. Durham's numbers are there, as well as Freeport Middle School. In the middle school numbers, at the high school, the indoor track is included in the winter, but for Freeport Middle School and Durham, the indoor track is not, because that doesn't start until after February break. So we'll add those into the winter once we have them.
So like winter for the prior years does include that number, so that's why it looks lower?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you last year for supporting the middle school indoor track coach. We had over 60 kids come out for Freeport Middle School indoor track, and we had one coach, and that was disaster. Safety, supervision, and so at some point, although it's not on the phase-in plan that you'll see here in a minute, if that continues to grow, we you know, right now it's 31 to ratio. We may be looking at a third coach. The same with outdoor track. We added a Freeport Middle School outdoor track last year. Middle school track originated in Durham when we consolidated. Freeport Middle School didn't have track. And so we used the shuttle bus to bus Freeport Middle School kids up to Durham. And then once the track came, the program moved to the track, obviously, and our numbers grew so much so that, again, we needed a second coach. And so Durham had their coach, and so it made sense to have a coach that knew the Freeport kids. So now each school has their own coach, but it's one team, they practice together, they compete together, they get a team score together. But again, the numbers are growing. I might be back here next year looking for a third outdoor track coach as well. This year's budget is we have added a Freeport High School head varsity swimming coach. For the last 2 years, we have been helping to fund Yarmouth's assistant coach. And it's a Freeport person, kind of earmarked as an assistant to help with the Freeport kids. So the stipend of $4,700, that's not the total add to the budget, because we've already been paying Yarmouth $2,524. So the actual increase to go to our own swimming team for a coach would be $2,217. The things that are beneficial to being our own team, for the last 2 years we have been a co-op with Yarmouth, and it's called an individual co-op. So their coaches are our coaches, and when we swim in a Yarmouth swim meet, when Yarmouth swims against, when they swim against anybody, our kids swim exhibition, so they don't get scores. They get times to qualify for the state meet, but they don't get a team score, they don't get an individual score. We can finish first in an event, but we don't finish first because it's a meet between Yarmouth and Falmouth. So now, being our own team, we'll get team scores. We'll be able to come in first, second, third, and I think Yarmouth has been fantastic. They've been very accommodating. I think our kids feel like they belong. But this, I think, is the next step to having our kids feel like they're representing Freeport High School a little bit more than what they are. Also on bottom, you'll notice that there's an additional $1,000 for swimming. That supports 2 additional co-op swimmers. So if the head varsity swim coach was not approved, we would continue with the co-op, and that would, right now we have 9 swimmers. With graduation, we're predicting anywhere from 8 to 10. If we do go our own co-op, that 1,000 would be added to what we already have to have our own pool rental. Yarmouth has 2 practice times a day, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, and their total pool rental comes to just over 10,000. So this would give us 5,000, which we would not be having 2 separate practices. We would be having one, and it most likely would be in the evening because that's where the fewest swimmers go. Right now, I think that supports 2 lanes. So during practices, the pool is rented out in lanes. So you can rent 2 lanes, 3 lanes, 4 lanes, and that would give us 2 lanes for practice. If this gets approved, we would not have any home meets. In talking to the conference and the league and the schools, it's not unrealistic to ask for your first time out where you've never had a team before, you don't have parents experienced with timing and such, that we would have a schedule, and I think it's basically 1 meet a week. There might be 2 in the week, but it's not unusual to ask to have a schedule of all away meets. You'll see on the, actually I'll have you turn there right now. If you go to after the participation numbers, this is our proposed budget phase-in plan. It started back in 2010. This is a history of what we've added. We had a number of teams that were fully funded and partially funded by boosters, and we came up with a plan to fund them like we should be funding them. You'll see in 21, 22, there's $4,500 there that I would propose to add a year out, and that would cover the cost of our home meets. We would now need to rent the entire pool, not just 2 lanes, but the entire pool, pay for timing, officials, and scorers, etc. The other significant increases for FY21, there's an additional $1,600 for girls ice hockey. That supports an additional 2 skaters from 5 to 7. Yarmouth charges $800 a skater, and I just came from a tournament game. The Yarmouth Freeport, they finished the season number 4, and they were hosting the Winslow Gardner Coney co-op, and I left at the 12-minute mark in the first period, and we were up 1-0. But the reason I went is because one of the Freeport students for the 2nd year in a row was awarded the Hobie Baker Award, and that was Paige Rinaldi. Last year it was Margaret Parada. So for a co-op team, you know, our kids are doing great. So
I just saw an article in the Press Herald about her. It was a great article.
Yep. Yeah. And going up, there's another $1,800 in for home playoff games. We've really never had to budget for that. It's kind of a good problem to have. And so what I've budgeted for is 2 home soccer playoff games, 1 football game, 1 basketball, and that should be, I think, 1 lacrosse. I think I held down the capital button. But that covers things that we have to normally pay for a game, police, clock, score, PA. The $8,600. So each year we have a uniform rotation, and in the last 2 or 3 years it's been budgeted at $11,500, and that covers anywhere from 4 to 5 to 6 different sets of uniforms depending on the year and whose turn it is and what group is in there. So I put golf and tennis together. Those are, one, very small teams. Two, it's not a whole uniform, it's a shirt or a pullover, and so those are one kind of buying group. So for the last 2 or 3 years, that uniform rotation has been funded at $11,500. If you turn to the last page, so the uniform rotation was put together just after the year 2000. It involved coaches, myself, and we looked at what uniforms we had, how old they were, how many different sets of uniforms we needed. There are some teams that don't have home and away. It's baseball and softball. They don't have home and away. Football has home and away jerseys, but not pants. And so each set's a little bit different. Girls lacrosse and field hockey use the same uniform. So if you look at boys soccer, boys and girls soccer, and boys and girls basketball, this rotation was built, again, like I said, in the year 2000, somewhere in that vicinity, when first teams didn't exist. And so this was built with varsity and JV teams only. And we were purchasing soccer uniforms every 2 years. So they would get a home uniform in 1 year, the next 2 they'd get an away, home, away. And so when you go down through varsity, varsity, JV, JV, and then you buy a new one, they all get bumped down the line. So for soccer, when just varsity and JV, the life cycle of a uniform was 8 years, which is kind of long, but in theory, they wear them for 2 hours a day for 16 times a year. There is mud and rain and stuff, but that seemed to work at the time. If you look down further, basketball, again, we had four different sets of uniforms, home and away, for both varsity and JV, and we were buying those every 3 years because they're not outside in the elements. They don't slide on the ground in dirt. And so the life cycle of a basketball uniform was 12 years. And again, it sounds like a lot, but it's shorts and a pullover, and it's inside, and you wear them for an hour and a half for 18 times a year. So now we'll add in first teams. And we've had first teams in boys for a lot longer than we have girls. But now, if you add 6 sets of uniforms, and if you look at the green box, so the example for basketball, in year 1 you buy a home, in year 4 you buy an away, year 7 home. So if you go down that, now with first teams, the life cycle of a basketball uniform is 18 years. And let's just say you lose 1 uniform every 3 years. And that's that. We probably do it more often than that. So now not only are they old, but you don't have enough to go around. And the same example with soccer. So this budget, if you look at the blue square to the right, the regular uniform rotation for 2021 is boys soccer, boys basketball, girls basketball, and alpine. I've asked for an additional $8,600 to cover 4 additional sets of uniforms: boys soccer, boys basketball, and girls soccer. The varsity uniforms we have are fine and they look nice. The problem is when you hand them down, our sub-varsity, you can't say the same. If there's one complaint that I get in some conversations at booster meetings, it's the state of our uniforms. You will notice that girls soccer is only there once, and the reason being, it's either 2 or 3 years ago we purchased new uniforms through Nike for our girls soccer team, and we bought a custom set. And Nike called and said, well, sorry, but they're not going to be there until the 1st of October. And they said, do you have another set that you could use? And so I kind of fibbed a little bit and said, no, I really got to turn these down. I got to send them down because the other teams, we have to pass them down. So they offered to send us another set of stock uniforms for free. So in that 1 year, our girls soccer team actually got 2 sets of, I can't remember if it was home or away. So our girls soccer program is in a better place than our boys, and so that's why and actually girls are up for next year as well. So they're in a better place, and they're set to get some in the year 21-20. And that's all I have.
Okay.
Do you have a different rotation for the middle school uniforms?
Yes, but
So-
also Durham as
okay.
well.
And so that's already built into the budget. You just had the presentation for the high school because there's a change.
Because there's a change,
Okay.
yep. Yep, at the middle school, so next year at Freeport Middle School, the rotation has baseball, softball, field hockey / girls lacrosse for $5,750. Durham has boys basketball, girls basketball, and we're going to throw a little money at cheering. Their program has been coming up a little bit. We didn't feel we wanted to go out and buy a whole new set of uniforms when they're just kind of getting to restart again and the numbers are low. So we are going to get them some T-shirts and practice T-shirt and shorts so they can all kind of look the same and feel good about themselves.
Maddie.
As a former booster parent who's been through this with you, I'm always so impressed with this whole phase and plan. But I'm just curious: is there a swim booster club?
In Freeport, no.
Are you preparing
in
them?
Yarmouth?
Are you? I mean, because if this happens, I mean, I just know how much the booster fundraising figures into this phase-in plan and how important that is, and I just think they should have to pay their dues a little bit too.
Their uniforms are cheaper. No, well, I know it's the pool. It's like hockey. Valley.
So speaking of swimming, thank you so much. Great presentation. Wondering if you're watching the number of middle school stripers from our communities to try to strategize for the size of the swimming team.
Well, so
when you plan on having a full-fledged swim team.
Yep.
next year.
So when I added the money this year, I actually asked the folks at the Y and Rebecca Harrison, who's a middle school teacher and who is the Yarmouth assistant that's kind of attached to us. She got me the roster of all of the stripers from grades 8 down to 5, and so we are watching that, and as that grows, the number of lanes that we'll have to rent for practice will be probably the only amount we'll have to increase. One coach is good for 20-25 kids. I mean, there's 20-25 kids on a soccer team, and we pay one coach. So I think, coach-wise, we're set. It won't add any cost to a meet. A meet is a meet if you have 30 kids or 40 kids. The cost will be the pool rental for practice.
Curious to know, what are you seeing from the younger groups? Are you seeing a lot of swimmers there?
Not many. There are some. There's a couple of classes, and I wish I should have brought that. There are a couple of classes with 3 and 4 kids. Just because you swim stripers doesn't mean you're going to swim high school. And if you don't swim if you don't swim stripers, doesn't mean you won't swim high school. We have the majority of our 9 swimmers now aren't stripers. I think it gives them an opportunity to swim in a different kind of environment than the stripers.
Are you making any effort, or is it worth making the effort to publicize to the middle schools in Durham and Freeport that this is an opportunity for high school? So maybe that will elicit some interest. I think it may be hard for someone to start swimming competitively in 9th grade if they've never really have swum before. It's a little different than running.
Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I know that we have at least 2 or 3 kids who have never competitively swam who are on the swim team. Yeah. I've had conversations with one parent regarding a middle school swim team. Cape and Greeley, who have their own pools, They have their own middle school teams. And Yarmouth is the only other one in our conference that has a school-organized middle school swim team. The others are all through the Stripers and Ys and swim clubs. So their schedule is, they try to come up with a schedule, but it's hard because there aren't that many middle schools that actually have middle school swim teams. It's kind of like middle school ice hockey. It's kind of run by the groups who own the facilities, really, as opposed to schools.
Can I ask about the team snap for the middle school?
Oh, yes. So I was just talking with Ray. Ray and I can't remember if this is the first full year of using Team Snap with the school website, or if it's our second year. I'm not sure how Ray has been funding that, but this is the first time that the athletic department will be funding that, and I'm glad you brought that up. The Maine Principals Association is going to a website, a web page that's being hosted by Our School Today, and many of the schools are now also looking to change to Our School Today, because we do so much with the MPA at the high school level with rosters and eligibility rosters and just our coaches, that these two things will be able to join and share. So right now we have to do our own rosters, our own eligibility, then we have to do it all over again on the MPA website. So the benefit of changing to Our School Today is that that'll just sync now and save a lot of time and effort. We were supposed to have a demo tomorrow morning at our conference AD meeting. He was going to come to our conference at 9 o'clock in the morning and then go to the Portland SMAA conference at 11:30. So this is not something that we're just thinking about doing. I'm pretty sure there's 120 high schools that do sports. I would guess a very large majority of those are also going to look at Our School Today. I've just gone on their website and looked and spoken to a couple schools that are already currently using it. So we may try to pilot one sport this spring just to see if we can get it up and going and just do one sport. That meeting tomorrow has been canceled. It's rescheduled for next Thursday because of the storm. So we're kind of excited about that, and we'll see where that goes. If Our School Today looks like it can do what Team Snap does, it's more of a communication tool. It's not a scheduling tool. What we have now at the high school is a scheduling tool, and it really doesn't communicate well. There's too many steps for the coaches to use to get the information out. Parents, you have to come in and actually ask for it, whereas in Team Snap, it can be sent to you, so it's a little bit easier. We think Our School Today, it will be able to be used as a communication tool. If it is, then we'll bring the middle schools under that. It's easy for Freeport Middle School and Freeport High School to be under one because of the name, and they see us as one. But when you throw in Durham, and I think I made a presentation back before that, if you go to a website now and you see Freeport Middle School and Freeport High School on our website, Durham has the exact same Big Teams website, but if you put 3 schools, and it's even big with 2 schools, there's just so much information there you can't go through and find your team and your game and your site. And whether or not Durham with fewer teams, it's really worth to change now. I think that's something that we'll have to look at and see if it's viable for Durham as well. They don't have the MPA issues that the high school does. Neither does middle school. Neither does Freeport Middle School. But so we'll have to look at that and see if it's worth looking at for Durham as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if they all go under the same umbrella, then obviously that's probably the most convenient and, streamlined version. But if the Our Schools Today doesn't really apply for the middle schools or doesn't serve the same purpose, then I might suggest doing Durham with the Team Snap. Having used Team Snap outside of the middle school, it is a much easier tool, I imagine, for the coaches to blast out information.
Yeah, because Team Snap is a communication tool.
Right.
And my administrative assistant and I, when this first came, we kind of had to give it up. And at first we told coaches, we don't want you changing games. You can do practices, but don't do games. My administrative assistant and I, we do the games just because we want to make sure that I know when a bus is coming for what game, and if they start doing that. So at first we kind of looked at each other and said, oof, we're not in charge anymore. How's this going to go? But it's gone fine. And I think Ray will tell you that last spring when we had all that weather and all the rain and cancellation after cancellation, reschedule, the Freeport Middle School had very few phone calls because it's a communication tool. And that might be something for Durham to use as well. We find that middle school kids and middle school parents need that communication more because the parents have to provide the transportation. I think at the high school, kids are more responsible, and we expect them to be more responsible. And so I think Team Snap for the high school, we haven't found. I think there are some high school coaches that use it on their own, but for the scheduling purposes, the high school can never go to Team Snap. It just doesn't do what we need it to do.
And I know it is scalable, when you do it for more than one team. I know there's a cost per team, but when you do it for a group of teams, I know it's cheaper. So I don't know if the RSU can get a license for the number of middle school teams or whatever. But I think that the communication tool is a good one, and it, I noticed the difference in the middle school sports versus the other sports that we play. So I would encourage them to consider it for both. But if they're all going to one system, it doesn't matter. So. Yeah.
Just quick question on access to the gym during games. I got a call from a community member a couple weeks ago, upset that people aren't able to access the gym for a basketball game through the cafeteria, that they have to park in the back lot and then walk around. Was that part of the consideration during the renovation and the expansion about access to the gym from that back parking lot?
Yeah, having another access to the gym was never a conversation that I was involved in, and I think because of safety and one of the reasons we have police at every home game now is because we don't know who's coming through the front door. And if they're coming through two front doors, then we don't, it's just harder to monitor. I meet with the folks in the concession stand at basketball and also outside and just say, outside we have used the school radios before, and I've just said if something comes in through the front door that doesn't look right, give me a call and I'll come. One of the examples, I took a course in after school safety, and during the school day everything's locked and you got to push a button and the door's going to be unlocked for you. At 2:30, this place is wide open, and at 7 o'clock, when the varsity basketball games going on, not only is our community coming in, but we get people from other communities, and we don't know who they are. I mean, there could be a couple, even an RRSU couple who's going through a nasty divorce. It's ugly, and they both wind up the same place at the same time, and what are we going to do? So I think for security's sake that's why we just have that one entrance, and people do leave out that way, but they don't come in.
Gotcha. Great, thank you.
So.
Got a couple of comments here. Firstly, I like seeing that, although you didn't discuss it in full, the material here on school and sports with learning results and the implications that participation in sport have in academic and other aspects of life. As somebody who was a professional athlete for quite a while, that's something that, those are the keys for me in athletic life, are things like the teamwork and the goal setting that really stick with me. So I appreciate the emphasis on that. And building upon that was, the other thing I like to see is, having been in sport here, in soccer, which is not my forte, to put it politely, the awareness of jersey rotation and, feeling like getting out in the field and playing and having a jersey that is not only doesn't look new, but doesn't smell new either. And so just being that awareness of that is nice. But going back to the aspects of sport and participation, I'm assuming, and from the information that I've gotten, participation is completely opt-in, or is there, and what the encouragement is for participation, and building on that, options for lower grades, either 6th grade in the middle school or 9th, 10th in the high school, where students may not be, and rules about it too, are not eligible to compete on a varsity. If you can't have if 8th grade team, you're not going to have a 6th grader on the 8th grade team. And are there places for either on the first team? Is that inclusive of everybody who wants to participate?
So
if that makes sense. I mean, are there
There's
enough places for
there's
people
3 or 4
who
questions.
may not be? Yeah.
What you just said, so I'm going to try to hit them all. First of all, our conference supports 8th grade teams and 7th grade teams.
Right.
There are 2 exceptions to that. One is Durham, and one is the Raymond School. What's the name of that school? Jordan Small School. They are so small that if they had 8th grade teams and 7th grade teams, neither of them would be competitive. So they go to an A-B model, and actually a lot of times they go to an AA model. They try to make both the teams the same so that each basketball team has someone who can bring the ball up. If you put all the best, our conference doesn't allow 6th graders to play unless you need them to help fill out teams.
Right.
We use 6th graders we don't use 6th graders in soccer. We use 6th graders in field hockey. We don't use, by league rule, we don't use 6th graders in football just because of the contact aspect. Basketball, we're using 6th graders this year. We actually have 2 7th grade teams at Freeport Middle School. Durham is not using 6th graders anymore. They used to. They've gone to the conference rule. In cross country, we have 6th graders. Durham and Jordan Small actually can use 5th graders. Again, an exception for those very small schools. In the spring, baseball, softball, we don't use 6. Boys lacrosse, we haven't used 6th graders because of the contact, and girls lacrosse, we do use 6th graders.
So what options exist for 6th grade?
6th graders, there's still in club, community ed, and travel.
Okay. So they are really on their own to find options.
Well, yeah, through community programs or Freeport United or the youth basketball and stuff, yes.
And on the high school level, is that inclusive?
So it's
of
not a
everything?
private school model where
Right.
you have to participate. It's voluntary, and we really haven't had the need to cut kids. There have been a couple of sports where we've just had too many kids, and we don't have enough uniforms. But 2, again, it's like class size. How many kids are you going to have on a team before it affects the class and the learning, and of course the all important playing time. We've had to cut kids in boys soccer, boys basketball, and baseball. But other than that, every kid that comes out and plays is on a team. The first team is named the first team for a reason. That is the old freshman team. And when you have a sophomore on a freshman team, doesn't sit too well. So actually the Portland League, the SMAA, probably 12 years ago, they were the first ones to change the name. And for the first 2 or 3 years, everyone said, oh, that's just the freshman team. But now that it's been around, it's the first team. And we have freshmen, sophomores, and juniors on our first team. We actually had a senior exchange student who had never played soccer before and just wanted the experience, and skill-wise, the first team where that student belonged. And And your place on what team, it's all competitive. The best 12 are going to make the varsity basketball. The next 12 are JV, and the next 12 are first team. And that's the same with pretty much every sport. But I will say it is the same as every sport.
Thank you.
I'm going to follow up on Susanna's question with the 6th grade. I've noticed at our 7th grade level, we're just not as competitive as other schools in our conference, and wondering what are the other schools doing for their 6th graders, the same schools that are in our conference that appears to be working to get their skill level higher by the time they're in 7th grade than what we're seeing at the middle school level.
Are you talking about a specific sport in a specific school?
No. Boys at Freeport Middle School, 7th grade.
So in the sport of soccer, we have Freeport United, which is equivalent to any other town's travel club. We actually play against them. I wish Ray Grogan was here because he could answer the question about soccer. There's not a lot of field hockey is usually done by the school or the town's varsity coach with their high school kids. There is not a youth field hockey league that anybody plays games in any town. So it is what you do in your own town, and it's typically run by the Y, the Rec, the varsity coach, community programs. Basketball, our kids are in the same travel league as all the other schools, the same exact league. We play games here. It used to be hosted at Cape, it then came to here. We used to host the league. Now the league has games that are played all over, and you host X number of games if you're in the league. Baseball, softball, we have Little League Baseball, softball. Lacrosse is also a sport that doesn't have youth leagues. I think travel teams are starting to come, and I know lacrosse in the youth is starting to be a little bit more big indoors in the winter. They do have some leagues in the winter, but I think we're doing just the same with our youth. I think since I got here, it's vastly improved. That was one of our weak areas. I think there's two reasons why in the last 3 or 4 years the high school has kind of surged. At the high school level, there was kind of 3 tiers of competitiveness. The top tier was Yarmouth, Falmouth, Cape Greeley. Maybe you throw in York. Then the second tier, we were probably the top of the second tier with Lake Region and Wells, and depending on the sport. I think we're now in that top tier in pretty much every sport, and I think there's 2 reasons why. One is Hunter Road. I think the kids in high school now grew up as youth in 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th with Hunter Road at their disposal. So I think that facility has been huge, and I think the high school is now just reaping that benefit. The other thing I think is the track, turf, and lights. I think the lights excite kids. If you're in 3rd and 4th and you come to a game and there's lights, I think that has been a shot in the arm, certainly a boost of pride and confidence, and you go to last to first as far as your facility goes, and that I think is just has really had a tremendous benefit.
So I just want to make a comment. Thank you, Susanna, for asking the question this year, so I didn't have to ask about the 6th grade. So it's your question from now on, but I do want to comment as a follow-up. An idea that I've been thinking was maybe if community programs could start offering the programs for 6th graders at 2:30 and not at 5:30, it would really increase the excitement and the participation, and also the 6th graders wouldn't feel left out because everybody else goes out and plays and they can't, and it's kind of a downer, and it doesn't really help build that excitement and the continuity so that they can feel.
So I don't know what sport you're talking about, but that's probably facility driven. The facilities aren't. Every 7th and 8th grade team, every high school team is using. The turf is used every day until 7:15 when we have to get off it. The middle school fields are used every day for practices until 5:15, And then when games played, the games don't get over until 6:30.
And also, you've got all the sixth graders in Durham who don't get out of school till 3:15.
Yeah.
Right.
And also the
There's
coaching
always
base
like
is
an answer
volunteers,
to
too, so.
swat me down on this one.
But I think what Jeremy was going to mention too is huge. The coaching base is parents, and parents aren't available to coach. You know, if you look at Freeport United, the bulk of their practices come after 5. That's why we can send our high school soccer teams up there to practice once in a while when the turf's not available, because those fields are available. They're not there until 5. I mean, there's 1 or 2 dads that can get off and practice, but that's why those are available to us, and we're off at 4:15, and that's still plenty of time for them to come on.
It doesn't come with a coach, does it? Maddie.
So just 2 things. One, just to say that when I sounded really tongue-in-cheek about the swimming boosters, I was actually serious. I think it would be good for them to get a heads up and to convene a group. And I don't know if you request that or what, but that's my plea. But this comment is not for you. It's more for Becky. But it is related to boosters, because I'm no longer a sports booster parent. I'm an arts booster parent. And as you know, also not tongue-in-cheek, I would love to have the equivalent of Craig for the arts. And it wouldn't be as huge a job, but it would be great to have that person who would be here advocating for what's needed in the arts. And so my question is, during this budget roll-up process, like we hear from Craig and we hear from the different department chairs or school principals, but are you asking, because right now I know that like the drama in the middle schools, it's a stipended position. In the high school, it's a part-time position. They're kind of left to their own devices to advocate for their needs through the regular process. And I can tell you as a booster parent that, especially with turnover in those roles, they're not always aware of what the process is. So I would ask that there be, I know I'm a little late this year, I think I said it last year, probably even later, but that there be a particular eye to what do we need in that, just because one thing I say as a parent is to our teachers, Craig has this great process. You guys should do that. You should have a phase-in process for, what you ask for through your budget roll-up in the schools, and then come to the boosters afterwards. But it would be great if you were drawing that forward as well.
Cynthia can talk about this in her presentation, but she does that with the music. So that's in place for that. And then definitely the principals in their different schools, do that with the, I would say, theater and phys ed and those other areas. So I do feel like we have a process in place where I haven't found that people are struggling to know how to ask. But, and I would say the only exception to that was a couple of years ago when we had Natalie come on board at the high school with the theater, and I think we have clarified with her about that, and if she, I can reach out to make sure that we're clear again. But I do think we have a process in place for that.
I do have to corroborate what Maddie's saying, though. 2 years in a row, I had parents from arts boosters come in March and say, hey, how do we ask for? And I was like, it's too late. You need to start in October and talk to the principal in November, and then it goes into the preliminary budget in December. So there has been confusion about how to ask for arts, and I don't even have much connection with the boosters or the arts, and they were asking me, so they were really confused.
Well, so I guess I want to clarify. I'm not sure that we have a process for the boosters advocate. I mean,
No,
so I can understand why the boosters are confused because
sorry, I'm confusing everyone. Parents from boosters were asking me how the teachers and people involved in the performing arts department should approach budget season and how they should try to include requests into the budget.
Well,
So-
because
so-
Craig has a great communication with his sports booster parents. They understand he has a phase-in process, so that when parents get up in arms about uniforms or whatever else, he can say, because I've done this with him in the past, well, you're on deck 3 years from now. Come back to me then, because right now it's basketball's turn or whatever.
Right.
So I think that's what it would be. If there were an arts director, they could communicate with parents. I'm not saying it's your
Yes,
role.
right.
I guess I'm asking on behalf of a booster parent that there be greater communication directly to the arts teachers, since there isn't one person advocating for all the arts teachers.
We have a stipended position, a manager of the FPAC. I don't know if that could be.
Well,
rolled into
definitely,
that.
you know, there are priorities that go through there, and so we can definitely. I feel like our teachers do know how to advocate. Now, whether the booster clubs understand the process, we might be able to do a better job of having the teachers reach out to the boosters around that. But I do think our teachers know how to advocate and understand the budget process. If they're new, that might be a little different, but I guess, Will, you might be the only one left standing of the principals here. Oh, no, there's Jen.
I'm like, I hope Jen didn't leave.
Oh, so, you know, I guess that I would look to both of you to talk about how you convey to the arts department budget request.
So it's a pretty formal process at the high school because we have a department chair for every department. So our process for budget is that I meet with the department chair team once a month. So we start talking about the budget in early November. Then they go to their department. Each department has a meeting. They discuss what their needs are for the budget. Then the department chair comes back and meets with me. And then I meet with Dr. Foley, present the budget from all the departments put together, and then I go back and meet with them again, tell them what we're requesting, and then they go back to their department. So it's a pretty kind of collaborative process, I think. So all our new teachers and veteran teachers are required to go to department meetings, and so there's dedicated meetings for that.
Are they?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and then we met as department chairs just this week, and then they know what I'm going to present here, so they know the larger requests for all of the departments as well.
So I'm wondering if there's a disconnect between, so say like the performing arts department, right? And we have classes around theater and those sort of things. And do they recognize that in addition, because I'm guessing they're typically the director of the school play, the distinction between classroom needs, right, for the classes you're offering, and the extracurricular stuff, right? Like all of the stuff in the athletics is an extracurricular or co-curricular activity. So are the plays that we're doing. So are we making sure that they understand that that's their avenue for both of those things, not just what they need for their classes, but what they need to successfully pull off these co-curricular activities too? Is it the same?
Well, so in addition to the meeting with the department chair, I meet separately. The only two other people that I meet separately with are Natalie Safley for her budget for performing arts, and with Nate Menefield, he is our new choral director. So I meet with them separately because they have unique needs.
Okay, so there is a reach out to them about what they need. Okay.
And then, Will, could you kind of talk about at your level? And then, Cynthia, could you talk about the music?
Ours is a very simple process because we just really run a couple of plays, and the drama club really is pretty self-sufficient. So I think perhaps one of the things that may be different from the sports to the performing arts is we have less of interdisciplinary kind of interaction between the drama, the music, the art. There tend to be separate strands, whereas the different sports still fit under one umbrella. So perhaps that's a slight difference. But within those pieces, really for us, the music department really do work through Cynthia district-wide to identify everything from performance dates, performance needs, balance across instruments across the district. And then with drama, as I say, our drama club, if they particularly needed something, they would request it, but they actually managed to kind of get all their needs met through their ticket prices. So that's how it works for us.
Pull my back getting out of her car. Sorry. I know. So I primarily have worked with the music department with the instruments because there was not really a collaborative process in place when I first came, and the money kind of traveled from building to building in a kind of interesting way. So we got together. We developed a process. We first looked at we created a template. We had great discussions. What was our inventory currently? So I created these documents where they put all of their inventory in. Then the conversation went to, what does a high school band look like? What does a middle school band look like? What instruments are important to have at those levels? And then what does elementary instruments look like? So we were all together in the same room, and we've done this every single year, and so now we have this extensive inventory list, and we have a place to look for, okay, I have 6 trombones, but I only have 2 kids playing the trombone this year. I need another one over here. So it's shared. And so then we prioritize. They put in, okay, this is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a tuba, and the tuba is $5,000, and the trombone might be, I'm making this up, $1,200. I don't know if that's what they actually cost. I'd have to pull up my document, but and so we look at it in a global way. Everybody sees the same document, and the decisions are made, and it's worked out really well. It's been a great process, and the teachers are very happy with the process, and their needs, they feel, are being met. So that's kind of how we started, and I think the conversations have been really good and rich, and now we have an inventory, and then they have in their own budgets at the building level are the supplies that they need. We actually have another amount allotted for sort of, I'm going to say miscellaneous, but it's purposeful miscellaneous, so that if they need reeds, if they need those, an extra music stand because one broke this last year, or those kind of things. So there's that also allotted in addition to the equipment. Okay.
At the Durham Middle School Band concert, both of the music teachers came up to me and thanked me personally, like I wrote them a check for the new timpani drum. He's like, doesn't it make it so much better? It's fantastic, yes.
I get those emails too, so I like that. I'm not really, I'm just helping organize
yeah, exactly.
it.
You're more than welcome. So, Kate.
What are the instruments that we are purchasing for the music department?
I think
are
it's
these
just the really
like
big
stuff?
ones.
So, like trombones.
So some of the I don't want to say lower level, but some of the traditional, some people purchase them already. They have them, and then other people who have other parents have donated some that their child tried when they were younger, and so
that's why you rent them.
Sometimes we have this. Sometimes we have. Yeah. But we buy the.
But not like the euphonium.
Right. Like I think the really unusual ones. Yeah. The percussion stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, euphonium, things I didn't know about.
Is that really
before.
a thing? Is that really an instrument?
Euphonium? Yes. It sort of looks like a mini tuba, doesn't it?
I have to look that
yeah.
up.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to spell that. Okay.
Starts with an E.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I just quickly add one piece. So we might own a trumpet or a flute or a clarinet. Well, it's not so much even spare. It's for maybe a situation where a child can't afford to rent one, but would really like to be part of the band. And so it's sort of like we have other materials and other activities available. So we don't provide like a whole brass section, but but there might be a scenario if a child wanted to be in band, we might be able to say, well, if you're interested in maybe playing this or this instrument, then we'd love to have you, participate. But there is an annual rental night also, where predominantly people rent the instruments to see how it goes.
If there were instruments out there and I didn't have to pay a lease,
Kate's like, how'd I miss that option? Okay. Any more questions for Craig or our quick foray into music?
I do have one more thing that's not in my budget, and I didn't talk to Becky about bringing this up, but I'm going to anyway.
This always goes well.
So in the current budget, there is also $35,000 that will start a reserve account to replace the tennis courts.
30.
30. See, I should have talked to her and got the right figure. Yeah. So the plan is this summer, when the spring season is over, the tennis season is over this summer, we'll have the courts refinished again on top, and that's going to last another, who knows? I mean, we've, put paint on a pig, it's still a pig, right? So we'll fix it this summer. We'll resurface it. We'll grind down the bumps, fill in the cracks again, and that'll last anywhere from 5 to 7 years. Who knows? And then at that point, we'll have some reserve money. And I do want to bring up one more thing regarding tennis courts. Valley actually called me yesterday. The town council was having a meeting last night. L.L. Bean is now expanding their building, and they're going to be building on the Little League baseball field that the town has used for years. And so I went and saw the town manager. Well, first of all, I called Dennis Willett and Jason Chisholm to see if they had been contacted about what Beans was going to propose, and they said no. And then I went to the town manager, and he kind of talked me off the cliff. So Valley had heard or saw something that Beans was going to propose that it involves the TIF, which I don't know much about, but what was the town going to get in return? And one of them was building that Little League baseball field somewhere else so that they don't lose a field. And that one of the places L.L. Bean was looking at building it was at the Pownell Road field. There's one Little League baseball field at the far end. They might be suggesting to build one at the other end where the parking lot is. And so the town manager says that that's the first he's heard. They haven't made tonight or last night was the proposal time, and he said anything to do with the Hunter Road. The RSU completely funds the maintenance on that field. The RSU schedules that field. We use that field. Community programs use that field, and then Little League Baseball uses the Little League Baseball field. So the town manager said he definitely, if that was a proposal, that they would reach out to the RSU and also Little League to see if that's the best place to put it. So we're kind of now looking at maybe some other sites, so because that would really be problematic to have a baseball field at the other end. With that still being, we still anticipate using that field for JV football, middle school football, and all of our Pee-wee and youth. So to have a 6-inch mound on the 20-yard line would have to be chopped down and rebuilt every year. And then the backstop would have to be on the base of that hill, and so that's that would just be not good. But I also mentioned tennis courts to the town manager, saying that when the renovation and building project came, we initially had 2 additional tennis courts to be added where our 3 are. They were probably the first thing to be cut because there was ledge, and someone said you could probably build 5 new courts at Hunter Road for the cost of these 2 because it was just enormous because of the ledge. So those quickly went. So I mentioned to the town manager, maybe the town can get some tennis courts involved with this TIF as well. So he said he would bring it up. I didn't go to the meeting. Did you go to the meeting?
I didn't, but I have asked for those tennis courts too.
Okay,
so there are
good.
2 of us.
All right, good.
No, but the meeting ended up being that they didn't make any decisions on the location of the baseball field or on any of the other things that Beans is proposing for the TIF money. So it's all still very much in the beginning stages. But their image was definitely the 2 baseball fields right on those fields that the guys currently play football on.
Thank you all.
All right. Well, we flew through 1 through 11. 12 took a little bit to get through. So now we're on to 13, new business, and we're back to Jen for the 2020-2021 Freeport High School's Program of Studies. It's rolling off. Yeah, I'm getting better.
So I believe everybody has the memo with the changes. There are some changes, not quite as drastic as changes, or I would say not as many changes as we've done to the Program of Studies in the past. I wasn't going to go through every single one of these. Some of them, I did make a note of any change we made. So some were just some minor edits. Some were the names of programs. For example, where it says on page 64, AP for All, it was changed to AP for Me. Those are statewide programs, so we don't have control of the name. But so just, yeah, major, yeah. But so some things that I wanted to highlight from this memo. One thing is that on page 26 and 27, one thing that we have changed is some of the course offerings in math, which I'll come back to in just a second. But one impact to credits in math, we examined the credit requirements of surrounding school districts and really looked at our pathway for math. And what we came to was the decision that we are requiring 4 years of math. The majority of schools around us are requiring 3 years of math. We still feel like it's important to require the 4 years, but with the goal of having some different types of pathways, we are now going to allow students to take semester math courses, up to 2 of them, to count for one of those credits. So, for example, personal finance was just an elective math course. It did not count as a math credit. It counted as an elective credit. Now, if a student was to pair personal finance with residential architecture or with our new class, Foundations of Entrepreneurship, then that could be used as one of those 4 credits, which I think will really support students at a variety of levels in math. And I'll come back to the descriptions of the math class in just a second. Page 36, we removed unified PE to bring back adaptive PE. One of the we were really excited about unified PE. It was more of a logistical challenge than we thought. We didn't have as many what you would call partners, the students in the gen ed population that were able to take that unified class, and it ended up being more sub-separate for some kids than we wanted it to be. And so what we have come to the decision is that some of the students who were in unified PE are going to just be integrated into the general PE courses, and our students who have significant disabilities, significant needs, will be served in that adaptive PE class. Nancy Drolet is certified for adaptive PE, so she's the one who teaches that class. But we feel like students will make our students with IEPs will make strong connections with peers if they're integrated into the PE classes as opposed to being in the unified class.
Does this eliminate like the unified basketball?
No,
program?
this was
a
a course, and last year was this year. We proposed it last year. This is the first year that we tried to run this as a course during the day. On the other hand, we designed a unified theater arts class, and that went exceptionally well. So, it's a challenge of what kids are going to sign up for. So, unified theater arts was a phenomenal class this year for all the students that were involved. we have deleted a couple of math courses, and I'm happy about that. One of the things that we have really tried to do is to support students to be successful in Algebra 1 while not increasing the gap that they fall behind if they're struggling math students. So in the past, we had students take Algebra 1 over the course of 2 years. Multiple faculty members, myself included, felt strongly that that was just setting kids further behind. And so what we have done is that we've moved to a situation where students are integrated in their Algebra 1 class, and then kids who need support have an additional math support class. Right now, that has been super successful this year. This is the first year that we are trying that for all of our algebra students. And the number at halfway through the semester was that 23 out of 27 students in the math support class were passing their Algebra 1 class, which was great, gaining confidence and skills at the same time. What I'm really excited about is that we've been talking about it for a couple of years, but we're going to design and offer foundations of entrepreneurship. For those of you who are Shark Tank fans, this is the Shark Tank class. And so they learn about starting a business right from the start. And then if we can gain some momentum, my school in Massachusetts participated in a year-long course where students actually design a business and have the opportunity to turn that into an actual functioning business. This is the intro class, and then we'll see how well that goes. But they will have to come up with a business model and present it to an authentic audience. So we're really excited about that class, and that's the class that could be paired with personal finance, which I think a lot of our students will take opportunities of that. But kids who are taking AP Calculus, any math class, can take the entrepreneurship class as well. Pre-algebra kids could take it. And then page 53, we struggled with a class that was called Basic Music Theory. That is the class that in some schools comes before AP Music Theory, though it's not required. We've had very low numbers of kids signing up for that and felt like it was deterring kids from taking AP Music Theory. So what we've decided to do is not offer that class, but still offer AP Music Theory. And so students don't need a prerequisite to get into AP Music Theory. So I think we'll see an increase in those AP numbers as well. And that's where we were able to replace that class with Intro to Guitar. We struggle at the high school to provide music classes for kids who have not had prior experience in music. We have the music technology class where they make music on GarageBand. That's been a very popular class. But kids who are in band typically have taken band in the middle school. So if you've never tried an instrument, right now we have Intro to Piano. And so we're hoping that Intro to Guitar will get some more kids hooked into performing arts and music who have, for whatever reason, have not played an instrument prior. Yeah.
Is it okay if I ask a question, Michelle? So I was curious about that. So does Mr. McEwen think that a student could take AP Music Theory who never had Intro to Theory, or would they want to take would the guitar class cover some intro theory and then?
No, they're not connected at all. We're just replacing it in terms of his course load. But Mr. McEwen, who teaches our AP Music Theory class, actually feels like a struggle has been, because the numbers have been so low in AP Music Theory, he's allowing kids in who haven't taken Basic Music Theory already. And they've been okay. A challenge has been they have very different bases of knowledge, whereas now we know that none of them have music theory coming in, and so he knows what he's going to need to do to prepare them for that. You need extensive musical background to be successful in AP Music Theory. Part of it is actually singing and creating music, and so I think they we'll be very serious about the course selection process about who is appropriate for that class. But we do want kids to push themselves who, could have a good chance of being successful in that class and didn't take Basic Music Theory. So he's been a big part of that decision.
The goal isn't, sometimes these AP classes, the goal is that then you don't have to take your intro class when you're a freshman in college. Mm-hmm. Would that be the case in this instance?
Yes. Yeah. It depends on the school. depends on the school of whether they take that or not. Often, sometimes it will just count as, it won't take the place of a class, but it might count as a credit. So it varies from college to college.
So, Jen, question about that. Will the students taking the AP Music Theory be required to take the AP test?
All
'Cause if
students,
that's, they are right now, but if this is the only option they have for music theory, would there be any consideration to giving them the opportunity to take the course, but if they don't feel prepared for the AP test, to take it just to learn and not to be tested on it by the College Board?
So we haven't explored that, but students right now, if they don't take the AP test, they're still in the class, but the AP designation comes off of their transcript. What you can't do is by College Board, you can't put AP Music Theory on your transcript if you don't take the test. That's part of the agreement. But say a student was feeling totally overwhelmed but wanted to stay in the class, we would change the name of that class on their individual transcript to say Music Theory.
And could they decide, say in September, I want to take the class but not for the test, and be welcome into that class? Because most of the AP classes, unless you take the test, you are not able to enroll in that class.
Yeah, we haven't. We haven't advertised it that way to kids. I think we have a wide offering of music classes that they could take. It's certainly something that we could explore because the numbers have been traditionally low in that particular class. But it hasn't been a discussion that we've had, but we could. I was like, oh, it's still me. It's been a long day. And so following that, those are just some minor edits. One thing that we might anticipate is we don't know all of the Region 10 program of study details. So that might be something that I would share with the board at a later date of if there's changes to the offerings at Region 10. I think that's it.
I love the fact that you have this entrepreneurship class now. Great and super hands-on, and that's the kind of thing that kids at that age group get into. Question, is there any thought of expanding the offerings in the economics department, which we don't have one, it falls under math, but expanding the options into higher levels too, and possibly offering AP economics at some point? We seem to be pretty thin in business economics type classes.
So we do in our social studies department have an economics class. The numbers haven't supported having a second level of that. We look at we really generate it on student interest. So I'd say, for example, all students are required to take health, and 2 years ago was the first time that we had interest in having advanced health, and so then we create that class. Right now, economics, we have enough students to run one semester of it, but we don't even have enough students to run 2 semesters of that. So if there was more student interest, then we would generate another section of that. But right now, in terms of electives, I would say that one that's much more popular is, because we're competing with the other electives that are popular. Psychology is probably the most popular. Then we have 20th century film, we have sociology. And so a lot of students who are thinking about psychology and sociology in college prefer to take that over economics. But we'll continue to offer that semester course. And if we saw a high interest level, we could explore that. It's the same with statistics. We don't have a general statistics class. We just have AP statistics. We tried to offer it, and we just didn't have a lot of kids sign up.
Because it's painful.
This is painful. Surprisingly, the SAT prep class was also not popular. Unfortunate. It was very popular with parents, less popular with students.
Yeah. Fair enough. Jeremy.
Just a quick question on the reason for the Endeavor change to that bunch of letters.
Still says Endeavor.
Endeavor. Yeah. So that was so they were using that internally. We were not using that as a formal name. I believe that kids were a part of, that's like kid text speak-ish. So I think that's how they came up with the name. And so we have embraced the Endeavor name that we were not embracing before.
Question about sustainability. I know that you do have an AP environmental science and a regular environmental science. but those are both electives. There's nothing required to give a basic understanding of the impact of human activity on the earth. We do have earth sciences now for 9th grade, which is required, but it doesn't really address anything that has to do with sustainability. So I'm wondering if there's any way that the basic concepts of sustainability can be made available to all students in one of the required classes, because at this point in time, that is a big gap.
So we just shifted away from the science and sustainability. That was our class before. There are still some units and lessons that they put into the 9th grade science course. I think that in looking at the NGSS standards, we felt like Earth System Science. So students were getting to the 11th grade MEA test, and they hadn't touched Earth Science since middle school. And so I agree that it's an elective class, but also our students need 4 years of science. So it's, for some kids, it's not really an elective class. It is their required class. And some kids take environmental and AP environmental. And the numbers for AP environmental have been very high. So we fluctuate between usually around between 20 and 40 kids in the, who are mostly seniors, which is a significant portion of the senior class that take AP environmental. So we've just shifted away. I don't see us shifting back to science and sustainability as a standalone course, but it's certainly something that's brought up in the Earth Systems class and also in the biology content too.
So maybe in the Earth Systems class, could it be introduced as part of each unit? Because what happens now, the way the course is developed, they do units that don't include anything that has to do with sustainability, and then at the very end of the course, there's a unit on sustainability, but oftentimes they don't get to teach that course,
right,
that unit, because it's at the very end. So it could be integrated in some of the other units, or I don't know, your teachers are probably very creative and can find a way around it, but I'm just pointing out the fact that there isn't really a requirement for all students to have the basic concept of sustainability taught to them at the high school.
No, there isn't right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know this from you, but having seen the curriculum for some of the environmental studies classes, they don't talk about the human interaction with climate change either, as far as I understand. It's much more environmental systems in absence of humans and climate change.
Some of them do. If you tonight, when you walk out, if you walk through the science hall, there's like a new lesson that some of the classes just did that was talking about, it was like a food scavenger hunt, and it was talking about the impact on sustainability of particular foods. So there's some lessons that they're doing, but it's not the only central focus. You know, the College Board really helps us direct the curriculum of the AP Environmental class, so that's partially dictated by that. The Environmental Science course has shifted who is teaching that course from year to year, so at times the emphasis has shifted, but it's certainly something that we're talking about in our science classes, but we did move away from that as that standalone class.
Okay. Oh, wait, hold on. Kate's got one.
Do we have to approve the course of studies?
Or is this just for informational purposes?
Well, I'm just wondering because we've been looking at the policy on this. And I wasn't sure if that policy says we're supposed to approve this and, vote on it, or we just review it.
Well, I guess I would. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know we look at it every year. I don't think we've ever I don't recall voting on it. Doesn't mean we haven't, but.
The policy's a little vague, too.
It doesn't say course of study, right? We're confused about the language in the policy and if it's referring to this or to curriculum.
Oh, in general.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess I don't recall voting on this before.
Okay.
So we'll leave it in your policy-capable hands to bring back what you think it should say, not in a vague way. Yep.
Final question. NIASC accreditation. I mean, I happened to read it, said, oh, we're a NIASC accredited school, and I was wondering if you had any further thinking done on whether we want to continue with that or do some other kind of accreditation.
That's funny because I was at my, I participate in my New England Principals PLC that we meet 3 times a year, and it was last week. And it came up briefly that more school districts are deciding to step back from NIASC. We didn't get into what I would really want to research more is what are they doing instead. Some are doing nothing, and I'm not sure how the board would feel about that. So it would come off of the letterhead that we were an accredited school. And so I think it's not a conversation that a ton of principals are having right now, particularly because it's a 10-year cycle. So once you're out of the 10 years, you know, you're not thinking about 8 years later. But so, but I've heard the arguments on both sides, and I think it will be an interesting conversation for us to have to explore what people are doing instead, because there aren't a lot of options. There's certainly not another organization that comes in and does this, comprehensive review of the programs that you do. That being said, there's a lot of arguments of it's not targeted feedback that we then took as a school and made major changes to what we were doing. And so with an exorbitant amount of time and work, I think I shared that with the board. So, so far I have not yet heard of a really strong plan of what to do instead other than just backing out.
Kate.
Belabor this. I guess, though we might be not getting a whole lot of use out of the NIASC. Oh, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
NIASC. It might be like more because we're doing a good job. If we were not meeting their standards, you might get more feedback. Yeah. So that's one thing to consider.
Could be. Let's go with that. Well, I think that they certainly gave us feedback, of course, but I would say, in full transparency, it's a lot more about showing them what we are doing, less than recognizing, these are areas where we are really needing growth and what's the action plan. It is a part of what we're doing. I guess the question that other schools are exploring is, can you do that internally? Do you need this organization to come in and do that for you? If you are really looking at strengths and weaknesses of your school as a whole, are there different ways to do that that aren't $20,000?
You got 8 years to figure it out?
Yes.
Probably not, right?
No, we don't, because the action plan is due next year. So you do a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, and then you come back around to the 10-year.
Yeah.
So maybe it will be more top of mind when I get really close to that report.
Okay. Any other questions for Jen? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, look, we're back to public comment. Anyone? All right. So then I would take a motion to adjourn. Sure thing. Lindsay and Jen, thank you. All those in favor? All right. None opposed. Have a good night.